Burnout is something we talk about casually now. It's almost like part of the job description. We just expect it to happen. But what happens when it's not your first time, your second, but it's your third time experiencing burnout? My guest today, Bhavik Shah, knows that story way too well. After years in global finance, navigating high-pressure projects and high-stake clients, he found himself once again depleted, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But this time, he was also exhausted from something so much deeper: the constant assimilation, the quiet erasure of self, and the cost of devaluing his own worth just to survive corporate culture. Instead of walking away, he decided to create change from within. What began as a simple training to promote mental health turned into a lifelong mission of his. Today, Pavik is an award-winning culture change strategist, speaker, and mental health advocate who helps leaders embed equity into business strategy, foster psychological safety, and create workplaces where employees can thrive. His work isn't just about wellness perks. In fact, we talk a lot about how wellness perks are not the way to dismantle the conditions that create burnout, isolation, and inequity in the first place. In the conversation, we explore the mental health crisis behind the workplace and what workplaces are still getting wrong about employee well-being, and how to make mental health feel relevant and safe for everyone, from immigrant communities to those employees who still don't see the value in it. We'll ask the question that's at the heart of this work: what would happen if empathy wasn't just a leadership skill, but the culture of work itself? Welcome to Reframing Perspectives, the podcast where we challenge traditional thinking and explore the power of empathy in conscious leadership, personal growth, and human connection. I'm Dr. Payal Beri, and in each episode, we dive into thought-provoking conversations that expand perspectives and spark transformation. Because empathy reframes perspectives. Let's begin. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
So, Bhavik, you've been such a champion of mental health, and you've been such a champion of an advocate for this work. And it just I feel like it runs in your veins. But what I want to know is that before you were a mental health advocate working in this space, and when you were working in financial services, you mentioned that you were burnt out, not the first time, not the second time, but you had 3 burnouts before you were like, enough isn't enough.
Yeah.
So, what was that breaking point that made you finally realize that the third burnout is more than enough?
Great question. I remember that day very vividly. I was working on this client project that was super stressful. It was actually Brexit when the UK decided to leave the EU, and I was in London at the time. And I remember sort of like something coming over me. I didn't really understand the sensation, and it was midday. I was in mid-meeting. I just said, I can't make this meeting. I canceled it. I left my desk, locked in my computer, and just left the office and took a walk, and I had my first ever panic attack. And I never had it after and I never had one before, but literally felt that I could not breathe. My chest was so tight. And I've had stressful moments before in my career where there was a physical manifestation on my body, right? I would have heart palpitations and migraines. My body would fidget, right? But this was very severe in my personal opinion, and only because I didn't know how to handle it, and I never had something like this before happen. And I can imagine people who have panic attacks for the first time ever, they probably experience that feeling too, that they don't know what's happening. And I think that was the moment when like something has to change. Like this just cannot go on. And then I took a series of steps to do it. And it took me 3 years to figure out what that was, what that would look like, building a brand and a platform within financial services to finally then officially leave. But that was sort of the catalyst that changed everything.
Wow. That feeling of, where your chest is tightening and your heart is just racing,
Mhm.
everything. I mean, so many people would think that I'm having a heart attack, in that
Yeah,
moment,
yeah,
and it
yeah.
feels that intense. What was it like, when you think about that moment and you think about, okay, something has to change, but I think that burnout is weirdly been now just embraced into work culture as if like, well, I've got burnt out and then
Yeah,
now to do, I'm going to move
yeah,
along.
yeah. It's normalized now.
It's really normalized.
Yeah.
What do you think that individuals need to really consider when they're thinking about that so that they're not getting to their third, fourth, fifth burnout to the point where, I mean, I have friends who've told me that, they're in the hospital bed and
Mhm.
they're still replying to
Yeah.
messages.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild that they still feel that level of pressure to answer emails and get on top of things while they're obviously experiencing a really severe physical condition, right? If you're in the hospital, your out of office should be on, or your manager should be managing these things. But to go back to your original question, people need to understand that this is not a badge of honor. Like, this should not be normalized. And the fact that you are burning out does not mean that you've now made it into the workforce. People will make you believe that, right? This is just how things are. This is how it's always been. If you are, if you can't handle the pressure of this XYZ industry, you shouldn't be in here. This is how level management works. All the sort of corporate BS that they give you, right? But it's mainly because the culture of an organization fuels off of burnout, and they fuel off of people not being able to self advocate. They want folks to essentially take the situation as it is. Either they suck it up or they leave, but the industry, the workforce is not going to essentially change. That's what they're hoping for. And when I say they, I mean leaders of these corporations who just, fuel on fear and toxicity. I worked in financial services for 12 years. I've been around the block in investment banking and consulting clients, and it's like a very toxic alpha male environment. And they are always, I don't think anything's really changed since I left, but they're always trying to teach you resilience, but they don't look at their own actions and say, why don't you change? Why do employees always have to be resilient? Why can't you just be more adaptive and empathetic and more human at the workplace so that we're not creating environments where people are burning out and having health issues and have to take absences, because that's eventually going to cost you money.
Yeah, there seems to be a disconnect in leaders realizing that the more that they fuel with fear and the more that they think that you working to your absolute maximum capacity as if you're a human is a machine
Yeah.
is a benefit to them because they're squeezing every single thing out of you.
Yeah.
But in return, there's so much cost that they're actually consuming that they're not actually paying attention to.
Yeah. And there's individual costs too, right? Like how you said,
Absolutely.
people are people are taking this work wherever they're going, in the hospital bed, at home, on vacation. They're not learning to turn off. And I do believe that the way the workforce is shaped up now, it's constant communication through, Slack channels or LinkedIn messages. Like, you don't really get time away unless you make a conscious decision to turn off everything at a certain time. Like when you're off, you're off. Remote working obviously made that harder during the pandemic, and now the future of that. But I believe that people need to understand that work cannot be your everything. Even people like us who are doing like good work and social impact, and we're trying to change people's lives, we both know that we need to turn off as well. We both know that we need to heal, mainly to continue to do this work. And individuals need to start realizing that too, that even if a company makes it seem that work is a family and all those corporate slogans, they're not. You are part of the corporate machine. And I'm not saying every company is like this, but you have to understand that it cannot be your entire life, and you have to create boundaries. And if you can't, and if you're unable to with that current environment, then you have to reevaluate your life. Like, is this the industry is this the industry I want to work in? Is this a life I want to lead? Because we all have to accept that some places will never change. And that's just the sad part of life, like a very important part of life.
I hear this all the time too, like exactly what you're saying about how if you're in this industry, then this is just what it is. If you want to work hard, you've got to put in the hours.
Mm-hmm.
You hear that in just recent podcasts, right? Emma Grade came out with her podcast Aspire, and she was recently on Steve Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, and she talks about how like if you want to have an extraordinary life, like you've got to work and put in the hours. And I
Right.
don't think she's necessarily wrong in that. Like obviously as an entrepreneur, you're trading a 9 to 5 for a 24-hour cycle.
Yeah.
work as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, but you're doing something you love and it's a little bit differently. But what I do think that she also did say, and which I think was taken out of people's clickbaits, was the fact that not everybody wants to lead that extraordinary life. And
Yeah.
they're okay with the fact that, yeah, I just want to check out at 5 p.m. and I'm gone and I'm out.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's important for somebody to realize that, yeah, if you want to have a much more slower pace of life, then don't join a startup. Then don't join certain spaces that require that velocity there.
Right.
Join a company that is maybe like a really large Fortune 500 that has like 300,000 employees and you're just like one person in there and you get
Yeah.
lost in there
Yeah.
in that. But even with that, there is this idea though that because of social media, and I think it's because of the way that everything has turned into like a personal branding machine, so
Mm.
LinkedIn and everywhere, that individuals who really just want to be able to set those boundaries are also, whether it's on a subconscious level or whether it's consciously, are realizing that I still have to like play this game of personal branding because I just want to get a job, but you can't get a job if you don't know the people, if you don't know this, if you don't know that. You can't get a promotion without these elements. And so, how does that play into being able to have a career and have a life
Mm.
that you're able to structure those boundaries, you're able to take time off and not feel like, even though I don't want to be a part of that machine, I somehow am being forced into it because that's where the trends are moving.
It's a great point. I think fundamentally things have just changed in the workforce where unfortunately personal branding is now part of how you build your career. And I don't think there's a way out of it. What I will say is that there are ways to do it ethically and there's ways to do it that feel authentic to one person. But it's hard because you have to navigate what you want. And I'm just thinking about early on in your career, right? A lot of people don't know what they want to do. Like I entered finance just thinking it was going to make me a lot of money, which not really. It did somewhat of it, but I did make a career out of it. But I didn't want to do it. But it took me a while to figure that out. It took me 12 years to figure that out, essentially. And when I think about new people entering the workforce or people who have kind of like their middle management, right? They have like 8, 9 years under their belt. They're probably thinking, do I continue this path of like continuing building the brand or do I reevaluate? And because they're burning out or they're just under the pressure, they don't take the time away to do this self discovery. And that's what a lot of people don't have either the capacity to do or the awareness to do. And that leads to more burnout. I will say, and this is not for every case, but I will say not being interested in your work is one of the bigger reasons for burnout because you just don't care, right? Your values aren't aligned with the work, and then you're working like 9 to 7 or 9 to 8, 9 to 9, whatever the case may be. It's just you get frustrated and you get wound up by the smallest things, and that leads to further burnout. So, and then you have to think about personal branding, and then you have to think about like who do you have to network with. There's so many people in my network now who are actively looking for jobs because they're trying to transition out of a job or they've been laid off or whatever the case may be. And it's so much harder now than it was even 2 years ago because they're looking they're looking for jobs against people who have like a list of qualifications and they have the same qualifications. It's like, but whose brand is bigger? Like, is this a culture fit, right? Like, is this person going to fit within blah 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 blah, right? It's just, all these parameters have now shifted the workforce, but the human side of things hasn't changed. Like, people are still acting the way they did when the industrial revolution happened in back in the 1800s, and we're still working in a way and in a manner that like everything is urgent. And I have a firm philosophy of saying if everything is urgent, nothing is urgent. So you have to radically prioritize things from a top level executive to all the way to an intern. Because if you don't, then you're just running around in circles like a hamster.
It's no, it's absolutely true. I think the other layer though to this is when you're in those spaces and you're working in that urgency and you're working in these spaces, I think one of the other reasons why some people may have a hard time speaking up as well is like you got to think about the nuances and the layers below that of,
Mm.
are they an immigrant? Do they have
Yeah,
some elements of that that's going on? Do they belong to a marginalized community?
yeah,
So how does that play into their perspective of things? I know for myself as a someone who has like chronic illnesses, working in corporate was actually a lot more taxing for me than working for myself.
Yeah.
Because in corporate, I remember once telling one of my old bosses that, by the way, I have these autoimmune issues. And because of that, there are days where I might have a little bit more brain fog. I might have a little bit of this, but like I always get the work done. I always meet the deadlines. I always do things, but like my days may just seem a little bit like fluid.
Sure.
I work better in the evenings than I do in the mornings, like things like that. And her response to me was like, "Oh, that's not what that is. Like you're just like a woman in your mid 30s. Like it's just your hormones are changing." And
What?
so for those
What?
listening, Bhavik faces and says it all. And in that moment, I was like, oh, okay, great. So it's like,
Wow.
here's a place now that I know that I can't actually be seen.
Yeah, it's not a safe space.
It's not a safe space.
Not a safe space.
So there's so many people who have that. And I'm just so curious for you with your journey,
Yeah.
how did that show up for you?
I completely resonate with that because in finance, there were not that many safe spaces, to be quite honest. And being a queer South Asian man who was still struggling with all his identities, I just felt that I needed to be the replica of that toxic white alpha male that I see in finance, right? Like, I worked with the traders on the trading floor directly, and I saw their success on paper. I was like, oh, I have to act like this. I have to be this person if I ever wanted to make it in this career. And it violated everything I believed in. Like I hated everything about this personality type because it just did not mesh well with me and my character at all. And I struggled with it. So I did not show up authentically. I did not advocate for what I wanted. This is why I burnt out 3 times, right? And that was enough because I just didn't feel like I could even raise my hand for support. And even the small times I did, my management always said like, "Oh, you're not capable of doing this job, so that's where we're gonna take you off this assignment." Right? So then that's another layer because you start questioning your ability and your competency and you start thinking that you actually are not qualified. You believe this narrative that they feed you and it takes a toll on your mental health, it takes a toll on your confidence. It took me a really long time to find my voice. And I will say part of it is just comfort of like being true to like who you are as a leader and as a person. I always thought like I work hard. Like I know I do the work really well. It may not be the way they want me to do it, but that doesn't mean that I'm not good at what I do. And I had to really find that voice. And I think a lot of times it's just frustration. Like you keep on falling. After a while, you just want to prove them wrong, right? It's like when you're trying to learn ride a bike and you keep falling. You're like, no, I'm gonna show this bike that I could ride it, And it's a little bit of pettiness, maybe a little bit of like ego. I don't know what it was, but I needed to show them, meaning the consulting management teams and the clients, that we can still achieve great things in just different ways. And once I got to that comfort level, and then plus the third burnout, I started just advocating for what I needed. But I found a way to find the middle ground. I did
How's
it.
that?
So rather than saying I'm burnt out and I don't know what to do, like I need help, I said, this is how I'm feeling. This is what the impact is. This is what I need from you. This is what I'll continue to do. And this is what, I can't do in this moment. So have a little bit more of a planned action rather than just, raising your hands and saying, I don't know what to do. Because for them, they also don't know what to do. They've never been in these situations before, and maybe they haven't had someone who advocated for themselves or said that I can't do a particular type of assignment or whatever the case may be. But having a action plan really helped me document all of this and then show them, and they're like, okay, this is doable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting. It's one of the best advice I always got from an old boss of mine who's also a mentor of mine. And this is like when I first got started in corporate America. I just moved over from nonprofit clinical therapy work into like my first job in corporate America, right? And I would go to him and I would say like, "Oh, this isn't working, whatever." And he's like, "Come to me with solutions,"
Yeah,
And it was like, "Oh yeah, obviously, right?" Like it's the same
right.
idea of like, yeah, come to you with solutions. And that way you actually have more power then. You have more
Yes.
control over how I want to show up, what is my non-negotiables. And
Yep.
now you're just like offering that up and they get to be like, okay, this is what we can work with, this is what we can't do.
Right.
You're actually helping to like reshape what mental health and what like human advocacy looks like in the workplace
Right.
by coming with a solution. You know, otherwise you feel like so disempowered.
Yeah, and there's something about finding your agency
Yeah.
and just understanding that you actually have control over your own narrative.
Hi, so I'm pausing the episode for a quick moment and for a quick favor. If you haven't already, if you could just click subscribe, leave a review wherever you're listening to this episode, it would be really helpful. The only way we can know to make sure that we provide the right type of podcast episodes, the right type of guests, and to make sure that we're delivering the type of content that you actually want to hear, it's through your reviews and through your support. Thanks. And now back to the episode.
What I think I struggled with, and what a lot of people struggle with, is that we probably expect them to figure things out because they are, in theory, supposed to give us a safe working environment. But a lot of times, things like that don't happen, right? Whether it's the clients, whether it's just a toxic boss, or whether it's just the work itself. Like, some things are just unchangeable. And that's why you have to realize, like, what you can actually compromise with and what's your non-negotiables, like you said. And understanding that distinction, and then going back to like the solution piece that you said, it just gives you a lot of peace of mind that now you're in the driver's seat. And if they don't agree with certain things, then you don't have to leave. But it is empowering to know, like, this is what I'm going to accept and this is what I'm not going to accept. And then you make a decision, right? If this works for you, if this doesn't work for you.
You mentioned something about how these are places that are supposed to make it into a safe place for you to work. And there's obviously some companies that take that very seriously, and then there's a lot that don't. And I think that sometimes with media, because it's media's job to do this, they cover a lot of organizations that focus on getting rid of that piece, right? And they'll prime it up when it's moments like COVID, or it's moments where it's like, oh, look at us, like we are doing this wonderful work around mental health and taking care of our employees. Or you look at some of the best places to work and it's like, I'm sorry, half of those should be like wiped out. Like that
Right.
is not a great place to work. We all
Right.
know that.
Yeah.
But what are you measuring great place to work? Just because it says we offer these benefits, we offer this time off, we offer, these mental health headspace and all of these apps.
Yeah.
And that isn't actually what is considered caring for your workplace. It
No.
goes back to that same idea that when millennials started coming into the workplace and companies started to have like game rooms and kegs and, all these shiny
Yeah.
things that, yes, millennials totally fell for. And we're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, this place is so amazing. I get to play a pool table and,
Yeah. Ping
not,
pong. Yeah.
right. But it's like, oh, no, 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 no. This is actually just trying to keep you here so you don't go home. So you don't
Right.
like, it becomes like your all-inclusive workplace. Instead of
Yeah.
an all-inclusive
Right.
resort,
Go
it's an
pay for your
all-inclusive
dinner.
workplace.
It's like, no, I don't want to have dinner at my desk.
Right. And so, Google, right? They have a chef, they have a kitchen, they have a workplace, like they have a meditation room. Like you literally could just live there and that's what they want. And so that's the intention. So you got to look at what's the intention behind why a
Yeah.
company's offering something, or it just like, it's like, checklist on the paper. But I
Yeah.
know that you have mentioned that you think that these wellness apps and surface level perks are not enough and not what we really need to be focusing on. So what do you think a organization should be considering to help people beyond those wellness apps?
Yeah. I mean, benefits does not equate to psychological safety. Let's just say that. And
Say that again.
benefits does not equate to psychological safety because a lot of people think that if a company has all these benefits, then the company culture is amazing, and it's not necessarily always true. What I measure psychological safety or positive workplace mental health, you have to consider how leadership trust is. Like, do you trust your leaders to not only navigate the company in a way that it's successful and then you're successful in return, but also, are they going to support you in your progression in your leadership careers? Are they going to advocate for you in spaces that you're not part of? And that all has to do with if the leaders actually care about molding and upskilling their people. And the second piece is that think about the managers who are leading, the people managers. How many people managers have we met or have worked with or even had them as managers who are qualified to do their work, but they're not qualified to lead? And that talks about capacity constraints. That means like you have to advocate for this team, you have to support them, you have to make hard decisions, be transparent, inclusive decision making, all of that stuff. Are these folks really trained up to lead empathetically and in a human way, or they just got to that position because they were really qualified to what they were doing and they got a promotion and now all of a sudden they're leading 8 people? And that's how I got my team. I just got to the next level and they're like, here's your team. Luckily, I think for me and my team, I am an empathetic person, and I've always been. So as much as it was hard for me to lead a team of 8 during my third burnout, and that's part of the reason too why I needed a shift, because I needed to know how to lead people in this very chaotic world. I still found it hard to just lead in general. Like leadership is a buzzword that we kind of throw out there all the time, but making sure that people are getting what they need from your job and they're progressing is really difficult. So that was like that's the second piece, right? And the third piece is how's the work life integration? I don't say work life balance anymore. I always say work life integration because there are times where you have to work late and there are times where you have to think about certain things. And it's about having that balance. And if the company promotes an environment like that, then that is a great way to promote mental health at work because you're openly admitting that work is important, but your life is as important as well. And sometimes life is more important, right? You have other stuff that's happening in the world. Look at where we are in the world. You talk about the marginalized communities. Every day people have to show up working and show up with their best selves while their communities are under attack, when their family members are under attack, like whether that's globally, whether that's nationally. And people are affected on a day-to-day basis. And the fact that a lot of companies don't understand that their communities are under attack and they still have to show up here and they're still not empathetic towards them, that's not really promoting psychological safety.
There's this idea that some organizations have where it's like, I'm your workplace. I am not like, this is a place where you come and work, we get work done.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I have to take the responsibility of being everything now? Why do I have to take the responsibility of now I need to be mindful of, marginalized communities and how they are under attack? Now I need to be considerate of this culture piece. Now I need to be considerate of, all these different elements versus like just come here, do your work and leave.
You're right. And my response is because you're working with humans. You're not working with robots. Humans are complex and distinctive and horrendously unique in some ways. And you can't just expect people to turn their lives off when they enter the workplace. Maybe it worked in the past, and it did in the past. But these people who are saying this have not been marginalized. So it's so easy for them to say it. Imagine walking to work every day and being verbally abused. You don't think that's going to affect you when you're in a meeting? Think about taking public transport and you survived a hate crime. Now that's not going to give you that fear of like, do I take this public transport again? Am I going to be under attack again? Think about if your family members just died because of an attack. You don't think that's going to affect you? And all these things, like I just feel like for me it's so second nature. And for people to not understand that there is a connection between what they're experiencing in life and how they show up at work, it seems so far fetched to me. But I do understand that there is a limit of what workplaces can do. And this is where my work comes in, right? I'm not saying be a therapist to everybody. I'm not saying listen to people's problems. I'm just saying be flexible. So like for example, your prime example, if you were in a psychologically safe environment and you had told your boss that like, hey, I have this chronic illness, my fluctuation with work, will go up and down, but I'll still get the work done. The proper answer is great. If you need more support to get the work done, let me know because you're still getting your work done. Not to assume what you're going through or undermine it or just say that it's like some other whatever. It's a ridiculous thing to say, right? But that's all, right? For me, I needed to go to therapy after the burnout. And I told my boss, I was like, hey, Thursdays for 8 weeks, I need to leave at 4:30. I'm going to therapy. This is going to help me with my mental health. Great. yep, we'll manage out, we'll make sure that things are covered, and that's it. It's just understanding that you're not there to solve people's mental health issues, but you have to have a little bit more flexibility. And those wellness apps are not going to do that. You think if someone's going to log in on Headspace when they're getting an email at 11 p.m. at night? No. And I wrote about this, right, in my HBR article that there's a whole study about Oxford University saying that they're actually not as effective as everyone thought they would be. And then all these tech companies now are failing because they're not getting their renewals on their contracts because they're saying the engagement's low. But of course the engagement's low because there's no change management element to it. You're not changing your culture, you're not changing your behaviors. You're just adding on, really shiny benefits, expecting people to use it, but you're still operating in a way that you did 100 years ago.
Oh my goodness, Bhavik. We could go on for a whole other hour on this topic right there because it's so true that, one of the biggest complaints that I've seen and that I've experienced myself in this space, they'll slap on these ideas of like, here's a wellness app, here's just in time learning, here's,
Mm.
all these things, putting the accountability on you that if you want to learn and you want to get better, then here, you do it, right?
Yeah.
And to some extent, absolutely. You can't teach someone who doesn't want to be taught. So
Yes.
100% agree with that piece.
Yeah.
However, when you create an environment that says that you have to hustle, you got to work, you got to, show that you're showing up every single day, but you offer time off for mental wellness, you offer time off for these things, nobody's going to take that because it's going to make them look weak.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that is the disconnect that happens at these organizations where the intention of the wellness app and all these things are great. But if you're not creating a space that says it's okay for you to use it, then it really is just performative. It
Very
is just
true.
there for us to be able to claim as an organization that look at us, we care so much about you, we have these offerings, but
Yeah.
then you're going to get reprimanded or you're not going to get this. One of the I heard the wildest stories to me is the fact that women who are in tech or women who are in startup who are trying to build businesses and they're working with iBankers, venture capitalists, whatever, the countless stories that I have heard of women who hide their pregnancies, they even hide the fact that they had the
Mm.
baby
Mm.
because it's going to impact
Yeah.
their company getting invested in. If they're in a corporate job, it's going to impact their role. The fact that women have to even consider that as an option, that how is that not affecting then their mental health, their well-being, and the well-being of this baby?
Right, right. I've I've heard some wild stories like that too. Like they've hidden the entire pregnancy and somehow they like it's remote work or whatever, and no one knows that they're a mom because they know that their career is in jeopardy. And that's a whole other conversation that the workforce has not been set up for women who are working moms at all, right? I mean, the fact in this country you only get 8 weeks of maternity leave is
And then also certain companies, some
yeah,
places don't even offer that. Like it's just
right.
5 days and that's it. You barely have even like healed anything to get
No.
back into it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And so, when you think about that relationship of psychological safety, because obviously I 100% believe that you have to have psychological safety and empathy in order to create that accountability that
Yeah,
exists in the organization.
yeah.
And so, what would you say to leaders as you're doing the work, as you're advocating for this? What would you say are things that a first time people leader, a middle manager, someone who doesn't have maybe the authority of a C suite executive yet, but
Yeah.
what could they be doing on a daily basis to help like shift that culture a little bit at a time
Hmm.
while the C suite leader maybe isn't ready to hear what needs to happen?
Yeah. I would say continue to, or maybe even just start building trust with your team. And that happens in very simplistic but impactful ways. During your one-on-one conversations, ask about the workload. Ask about if this is something that they are interested in doing. Ask about what their career progression looks like to them. You're giving them the avenue for them to take control of their career, and you're supposed to coach them and mentor them as well. A good people leader is doing both. You're navigating the work and you're navigating their careers as well. Because ultimately, you want to work with someone who can lead and who can teach you and who could sponsor you at a certain point. That's one thing. The second way they could do that is advocate for them when they're not in the room. When you're talking to your C-suite executives, like for example, if I was working under you and you were talking to whoever, like, oh, Bhavik actually did this amazing thing. Oh, okay, so now their name has been clocked now, right? Like they know like, oh, Bhavik's doing some amazing work, and just making sure that they're putting you into roles and positions where you will stretch yourself, you'll learn, and the employee will feel that this manager actually has my back rather than taking credit for the work or like, not putting them up for opportunities or special projects, etc. And then the last thing is talk to the peers. Maybe you can't influence the C suite yet, but you could influence other middle managers. Say, actually, this is what I'm starting to do in my working group. I'm having a little bit more personal one to ones. I'm asking about what their career plans are, their succession planning, all these different things, and start motivating them, start influencing change within your own peer group. Because at least that middle management level is then secure because there's so much research out there, and I agree with this. They're the most sandwiched position in an organization right now, and they're the most burnt out because they have the pressure to lead, and then they're also getting the pressure from the C-suite. And I have felt this too in many of my roles because you're trying to do so many things at once, and you don't necessarily have the support because C-suite only cares about what they care about, and the teams that you're managing are actually looking up to you for advice. So it's hard, and I get that. But if you start influencing your sphere, of community, then that could one give you more confidence to lead in certain ways. That gives you additional support, right? You could bounce ideas, you could bounce best practices, what worked, what didn't work, and just a different way of thinking.
Yeah. I think that what I'm really hearing from you that's loud and clear is that when we talk about mental health in the workplace, it's not about the quick like pat on the shoulder. It's not necessarily about the wellness apps and those things. And you're right, those things are losing money because people aren't using them because they're disengaged with it because they're not even getting the support from that direct person who matters more. There's more value in your direct manager giving you that support than there is in the larger organizations in a movement. And so what I'm really hearing is that mental health in the workplace equates to psychological safety in your teams. It
Yeah.
equates to, psychological safety in your relationship with your manager, with your
Yeah.
peers. And it's about being able to not necessarily come in and have like, the trauma bonding or any of those things. We're
Right,
not talking
right.
about that, but we're talking about, when something major happens in the work in the world and you come in and you're supposed to pretend as if nothing happened, then that is a damage to the mental health. We're
Yeah.
looking at it as if someone comes in and it's the day after some tragedy just happened outside of work, you're going to just pause and be like, hey, before we start the meetings, I just want to check in with you. How are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that may be all that person needs is that they got seen and they're like, okay, I can
Yeah.
now move forward.
Right, right. And the fundamental thing that I want anyone to walk away with is that you're not there to solutionize. You're not a therapist. What your job is to just understand that life happens. And as life does happen, you want to check in with your employees and saying, look, I can't control what's happening outside, but I can support you here. So what do you need to be successful in your job? Do you need a day off? Do you need more flexibility in your time schedule? Do you need me to like shift this priority to someone else? Do you need me to talk to the client? These are all these things that people can work on and really adapting the work culture because that means that the human is more important than the work. The work can still be done. Like maybe it's what you were suggesting to your manager. Like maybe you just need to log in at night. Maybe you just need the day to restore or, just take care of yourself. The work will still be done. I'll still attend the meetings, whatever the case may be. But those specific accommodations and adaptations are the real way to create a mentally healthy culture because
Yeah.
everyone wants to do a good job. Where people are trying to make careers. They're not just there to like BS and just like waste time, but they also need to understand that there's a human element to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bhavik, if there's one reframe
Mm.
that you could share with the everyday person who's trying to navigate all the stuff that's going on and who doesn't necessarily believe in
Mhm.
traditional forms of therapy and doesn't believe in and they feel that all these apps, they don't work. I don't care for those. What what could they do? What is something that they should believe in for them to be able to then advocate for themselves?
Just know that work should not be miserable. You should be happy at work. I'm not saying it has to be the happiest place, but the reframe is that we all deserve to work in environments that give us joy and gratitude and some sort of fulfillment. And that can look very different for very different people. But if you want to start feeling a sense of fulfillment, you need to start learning how to self advocate. It is a necessary life skill to have, and it's a necessary workforce skill to have. And if you think about it that way, that you deserve to have this at work, then you can reframe of why you need to self advocate for yourself.
Amazing. Bhavik, thank you so much for joining me today. I think that conversation about mental health and workplace is just, it's an ongoing conversation. It's an important one. And I think we don't realize we focus on these companies that are out there that are in the media, but like 90% of organizations are like small, middle organizations that don't always have the resources for certain things. But what I think that you're really showing is that you don't need to have the shiny objects and the shiny
Yeah.
performative stuff in order to create a good culture. Your culture starts with you being human.
Yes. So, there you go. Point blank. Period. Thank
Where
you.
can people reach out to you? How can they connect with you?
They could go to my website, www.bhavikarshaw.com. There's a whole contact form. My services are on there. Would love to collaborate if you need a speaker, if you need a consultant in any of these fields. There's so much culture work to be done, and I would be happy to support in any way I can.
Fantastic. And of course, Bhavik, we're going to make sure to link all of your HBR articles that you have
Thank you.
written such beautiful and such just impactful commentary on mental health in there.
I appreciate it, Paya. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Yeah, this is so great. Thank you so much.
Bye.
I really hope that you enjoy this episode. And I just have one favor to ask you. If you could just make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a rating and review, it's going to help us tremendously to make sure that we reach as many people as possible that you think should be listening to our episodes. I'll see you next week for another episode. And thank you so much for leaving that one review, that one subscription, and sharing this with your friends.